Good evening, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So in this video, we are going to be talking about where the real problem lies, because I came across a comment that I believe is something that is a general feeling of a lot of people out there when it comes to the inequality that is happening, the deviation, the sheer amount of how much more the rich have than the lower working class have, and how much the struggling working class have. I think this comment literally is the general feeling of it, and it goes something like this. If you are participating in the stock market, then you are part of the problem. If you say you are just trying to get ahead, yeah, well, so is everyone else. Namely, the people that need 20 million a month to survive versus the guy getting by on less than 500. Basically saying that if you need a lot in your life, then yeah, you're probably participating in the stock market. And if you're in there, you're part of the capitalistic system. And then you're moving yourself ever higher away from that of the working class. And the people who are earning so little have to struggle ever so much. And I think to myself, is this something that can change? Is this something that is not part of the system within itself that has been repeated over and over again? I mean, let me read it again. If you are participating in the stock market, then you are part of the problem. If you say you are just trying to get ahead, yeah, well, so is everyone else. Namely, the people that need 20 million a month to survive versus the guy getting by on less than 500. I have to refer back to the Cantillon essay to really clarify this stuff up, because there's a few groups of people out there. There are property owners, there are money owners, and then there's the entrepreneurs and the working class people. Cantillon's essay on economic theory. Chapter 13, the circulation and the exchange of goods and merchandise as well as their production are carried on in Europe by entrepreneurs and at risk. That's the title. This is what it has to say. Here, Cantillon introduces for the first time the theory of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs are the prime directors of resources. Their occupations come with risk due to the uncertainties, especially from competition and changing tastes. As a result, their income can be very large, but they also face the prospect of bankruptcy. The property owner is independent in having a large income from rent from the land, and the capitalist or large money owner also can live independently on interest. Everyone else is ultimately dependent on the expenditures of the property owners for their livelihoods. The only people who live independently of the state are the property owners and the capitalists. So ultimately, when somebody says, don't buy into the stock market because you're part of the problem, what you are saying is you don't want people to live independently. Maybe you can't do it. So because you can't live independently, you don't want anybody else to do it either, because the more they do it, the more they separate themselves from the poor. The more they separate themselves from the dependency of the property owners and the other capitalists who are out there. Cantillon goes on. Page 77 in the essay. And I'm skipping through the chapter a little ways. Let me make sure I get here. Okay. The number of money owners. The number of money owners in a large state is often quite considerable. Remember, these money owners, these are the people who live independently. They're not really working. They're lending their money out there and getting a return on their investment through interest. The number of money owners in a large state is often quite considerable, though the value of all the money that circulates in the state barely exceeds the 9th or 10th part of the value of the production drawn from the soil, because the proprietors of the money lend considerable amounts for which they receive interest either by a mortgage on land, or the commodities and merchandise of the state. I think that's important to understand. These people who lend the money out, where do they get that return on their investment? Where does it come from, right? It comes, let me read it again so that we can hear, right? The proprietors of money lend considerable amounts for which they receive an interest. Where do they get this interest? By the mortgage on land. People who pay their mortgage, the people who are receiving it, pay their debts to these people who have lent it out. You got property owners, right? And you have the money owners. The people who are getting paid on their mortgages are lending it to the people who lent that money, right? So they're getting considerable amounts of money from the mortgage on land or the commodities on the merchandise of that state. The sums due to them usually, this is so important. Remember, this is written hundreds of years ago, right? This is what it says. The sums due to them usually exceed all the money in the state. See, Cantillon recognized it a long time ago. There's not enough money to pay the debt. It's the same problem we experience today. That's why studying this stuff is so important. When somebody says, oh man, this is a new world problem, it's not, yeah, it is, because we got all kinds of weird technologies and changes and all kinds of different ways of communication and dealing with each other and governance and all that other stuff. But the underlying economic forces are still there. To think that they're not is really, well, I think you're going to be missing a big chunk of this. Goes on to say this, all right? They often become so powerful, let me read it again. They often become so powerful a body that they could, in certain cases, rival the property owners, if the owners were not often also money owners. Property owners becoming money owners themselves. And if the owners of large sums of money did not also seek to become property owners themselves. You see how this is work? Property owners becoming money owners and money owners becoming property owners. And this is how the elite and the inequality grows ever increasing amounts. Everybody else is working to try and make their way to get the necessities of life. And of course, Cantillon addresses that too, that the majority of the people will rarely exceed any effort beyond that sustains their life. He goes on, nevertheless, it is always true that all the sums earned or saved have been drawn from the land of the current owners. However, because so many property owners in a state ruin themselves daily, and those who acquire the property take their place, the independence given by the ownership of land applies only to those who can keep possession of it. Right? How many people can keep the land? Do we even really own land? As all land also has a master or current owner, it is from their property that all the inhabitants of the state derive their living and all their wealth. Everything comes from the property owners. The property owners that if it is from their property that all the inhabitants of the state derive their living and all their wealth. If these owners confine themselves to living within their rental income, this would be beyond question, and in that case, it would be much more difficult for other inhabitants to grow rich at their expense. It's literally the property owners exposing themselves to a luxurious experience that gives other inhabitants the ability to grow rich at their expense. This is the saddest case for most people to understand, is that they want to blame capitalists as if they can have some sort of magic wand that'll change the way that people behave. And I just don't get it. It doesn't work like that. When people have saved an abundance of money. In fact, he goes into there. It is true, however, that if some person on high wages or some large entrepreneur has saved capital or wealth, that is, if he has reserves of wheat, wool, copper, gold, silver, and some commodity or merchandise in constant use or circulation in a state having an intrinsic or real value, he may be justly considered independent. Like if you have a huge savings, if you have an abundance of wealth just sitting there, just a big pile of wealth, right, then you can live somewhat independently until the wealth's gone, right? He may be justly considered independent independent as long as the capital lasts. He may exchange it to acquire a mortgage and receive income from land and from public loans secured upon the land. Public loans secured upon the land, right? Bonds, government bonds. Doesn't that sound familiar? I mean, all this stuff is old stuff. You got to think about it. Like Cantillon wrote this hundreds of years ago. He had to observe it from all the hundreds of years before him. He may even live better than the small landowner and buy property from some of them. But commodities and merchandise, even gold and silver, are much more subject to accident and loss than the ownership of land. And however one may have earned or saved them, they also derived from the land of actual owners, either by wages or by savings of wages destined for one's subsistence. I kind of had to back up a little bit to get to that part. So really, that was on page 76. He ends this chapter with this: I will therefore establish as a principle that property owners alone are naturally independent in a state. All other classes are dependent, whether entrepreneurs or hired, and that all the exchanges and circulation of the state is conducted by the actions of these entrepreneurs. So basically, it's the entrepreneurs trying to get the property owner's money. And that's the way it's always been. It's always going to be that way, right? Because that's the way it is. And to think that it can happen in any other fashion, people want to think that there's some sort of idea that there is going to be some way of making it better so that everybody is going to be super happy, living in a house, making all the money they want. Living is, whatever life that they choose to live, like as if that's just like some kind of like way of taking place. I just don't get it. Right? To know and understand that if you are not moving yourself into a capitalist position, if you are not becoming the capitalist or property owner, and it's so difficult to become a property owner now, but it is so easy to become a capitalist. He says there's a shift there, right? That often become so powerful a body that they could, in certain cases, rival the property owners. Well, if you have a problem with the property owners, well, we can, as capitalists, rival the property owners. Go for it. How many people are taking a position in which that they are deploying their capital? How many people even understand what that means, or even that they should? Very few. Here it is. Cantillon is warning you, saying that this is part of the problem from a long time ago, and that it doesn't have anything to do with, government forces or anything like that. It just has to do with the natural occurrence of people who have acquired some wealth, savings, has put away for a time in the future in which that money could then be returned back to them with an interest rate. They often become so powerful a body that they could, in certain cases, rival the property owners. And if those owners are not often also money owners, and if the owners of the large sums of money did not also seek to become property owners themselves. You see how this works? You have to become wealthy somehow, some way. Earn more, require less. Once you have the money, you deploy that money into a return. People who say you shouldn't do that is literally trying to work against the idea of being independent. This is how Cantillon describes independent people. Everybody else says, oh no, man, I can live independent in so many other fashions. Here, let me just make government make that happen for me. I'm sorry, did you say you got to make government do something in order for you to live independent? Or should you live in a way that government makes really no difference to you whatsoever? Can you conduct yourself in a way that makes them irrelevant? Or at least give you the feelings that regardless of government, I'm going to do quite well with what it is that I feel that I have positioned myself with? Like, these are the people who live independent. The more I move into what I feel is a capitalist position, because that's what I really am truly wanting to be, is a capitalist who gets a return on their money, the money owner. Now, I don't want not necessarily be the property owner. I mean, don't get me wrong, I want to be a property owner, but it's so difficult to become a property owner. It's so expensive. But it's so easy to be a money owner. You go to work, you earn some money, you earn more, require less. You take that money, you put it into something that's going to have a return, some sort of interest return. Well, you're going to be moving into a path of people who live independently. People who say don't do that, well, what do you get? Yeah. Let me go check out this super chat before I babble on some more. Joe Spinella, $10. Thank you so much. I blame government. I blame the Federal Reserve. I blame Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I blame the taxing entities. You're not property owners. You're glorified land leasers. Okay, we'll continue to see. This is the problem that we have when we take on this sort of belief and understanding of it. And I really appreciate the $10. Don't get me wrong, man. I really do. But don't blame anybody, right? Don't blame them. If you give them blame, here's the problem. If you give them blame, then you're also going to have to give reason to the idea that there could be a fix. And to understand that this isn't a fixable thing, because fixing it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work out too well for you, right? Maybe it'll work out perfect for you and it's going to suck for me, and I'm going to wish that it was fixed differently, right? Because there is no perfect system in order to provide a way of life for everybody. So it is absolutely crucial for us to understand what is taking place right now. And if we can see and understand underlying economic forces that are at play that we can then use to our benefit, then let's use them. Let's take a look and see what it is that was being stated hundreds of years ago and relate it to what it is that's happening right now. I mean, you think about this for just a minute. If you got a guy, let me go back to where it was here, right? The number of owners in a large state is often quite considerable, though the value of all the money that circulates in the state barely exceeds the ninth or 10th part of the value of the production drawn from the soil, because the proprietors of money lend considerable amounts for which they receive interest either by a mortgage of land on land or the commodities and merchandise of the state. The sums due to them usually exceed all the money in the state. If you want to be in the position that takes the best advantage of everything that is going on out there, you got to be a capitalist. All right? Now, out of all the people that I have ever known to make it super rich, like all the people that I've ever known going to speaking at the Rebel Capitalist live events, all the people, all did it with property. They all did it with real estate. So when people ask me what is the best way to wealth, well, everybody that I know who has money, like literally everybody I know who has money, did it with real estate. They do it with multiple properties. They load up on them, as many as they can get, and they sell them when they see the time is right, and they rent them out for the most part to get a return on that investment. And anybody who is sitting there trying to say don't do it is literally saying, I can't live independently and I don't want you to either. It is so easy. Right? You can invest into a real estate investment trust, an ETF that's essentially backed by real estate. There are so many ways that an individual can do this and do it with like $5 at a time. Right? So many people just choose not to. Let's go check out another super chat here. We got Sleazecore Trick Bagger. I love it. $4.99. Could I just rent cheap and invest the difference? I don't want to be stuck anywhere. I don't want to deal with landlord BS. Totally. That is an absolute strategy if you choose to use it as a strategy. There's nothing wrong with renting. Renting means you have a 30-day liability. You know how awesome that is to be no liabilities and 100% assets? Go and talk to every rich person out there in the entire, everywhere, right? Ask them how many assets and how many liabilities they have. And the idea behind it all is to have as many assets with as little liabilities as possible. And if rent's a 30-day liability and you can continuously load up on assets, and you can load up on liquidable assets that are doing quite well, ones that have a return, an interest-bearing return to them, and you are actively moving in that position regularly while trying to maintain low rent, also using your ability to travel, to earn money in different ways, so being nimble at the same time in order to achieve higher income, well, hell, that's a brilliant idea. Like, I don't know why anybody would not want to do that. Just go for that for years and just earn tens of millions of dollars, just load up on that, and then live an independent life that you can travel around and enjoy yourself. I mean, go for it. Or maybe your goals are different. I don't know. That's me. I'm going to live in, like, I want to go RV around, go live van life and do speaking engagements and stuff like that. That's kind of like, everybody has different goals. It's not just equities, it's putting your money towards, I just keep saying it because most people just don't have any idea on where it is that they need to put their money. And if you just understand that you need to put it somewhere, right? And I'm not trying to tell people where to put it. This is not investment advice. I can't give you investment advice. I don't even know what I'm doing. So you can't, like, I can't tell people what to do because that's not what I do here. What I try to do is show people the underlying economic forces so that they understand why it is that they need to position themselves the way they do. And by understanding that, you can look, like, I can tell you about all the stocks that I have done, and I've actually done quite well with cryptocurrencies. Like, it is like the thing that I have done the best with, and it's like stomps everything else that I have done. So I can tell you all about how awesome I did at cryptocurrencies, but it's really not the point because that's like really a long shot and it was a pure speculation and I wasn't expecting it to happen and I wasn't trying to advise anybody to do it. And because it did so well, I'm pretty happy about it. But again, I'm not trying to advise anybody else to say, hey, look how awesome I am at picking out stocks, because really getting a 300% return on a stock in a matter of a year or two is pretty good, right? But how am I supposed to, like, tell people, like, hey man, I can do this every time because look how awesome I am at doing it? No, it was pure coincidence, accidental, right? I mean, a good hunch, right? I don't know how else you want to put it. People are like, how did you know to do that? I don't know, because I study a lot of economics and I figured that cryptocurrencies are probably going to do quite well. And considering Coinbase has been in it as long as it has, and I've been having an account with them for, ever since they pretty much opened up for business, as I stumble along my words, I felt confident in investing with them, and that was it, right? You invest in things that you know. And I knew that, right? Most people are, well, how you're going to lose all your money. And I'm like, I guess that's a lesson learned, isn't it? All right, Todd Ricker, 9.99. Thank you so much. Yes, he says. I get my statements in mail and just toss them in the garbage. Investing is about compounding and interest. It really is. I love crypto, but it's risky and you can't get emotional over it. No, and that's what I think is probably awesome about the cryptocurrency market for me, is that I really ultimately started in silver and Bitcoin. Like, those were my two positions that I got into. And since Bitcoin was just like all over the place and I was screwing around with cryptocurrencies in the very beginning, I ended up losing a lot of cryptocurrencies to a crooked exchange called Crypsy. Old Big Vern, right? Big Vern, just one day you couldn't log in anymore and that was it. It was all over. Anyway, so I've been ripped off in the early days, like before people even really like even knew what cryptocurrencies were or that there was altcoins or anything like that. And I mean, I was just playing around with them. So the more you played around with them and the more you kind of dollar cost average in, and over the years, and I had a significant, when I moved into the house, I was kind of complaining that I spent all my money getting into the house, putting a down payment on the house. And somebody sent me a significant amount of Bitcoin, I guess, as like, a helpful, like, here you go, man. Don't stress it so much, because here's some money. But it was like a huge amount of Bitcoin. I couldn't believe it. And I never did find out who had done that. But anyway, all these years of accumulation of this Bitcoin has now put me in a position in which that I have half a Bitcoin. And that's pretty dang cool, right? For a guy who had literally nothing, like pretty much nothing. I mean, I had a few hundred ounces of silver maybe and a little tiny, few $100s worth of Bitcoin. And that was when I was 40 years old and I had $20,000 in debt. And I was like just finished, I mean, just finished hitting rock bottom and deciding that I was not going to drink any longer. And so started going into recovery on that. And so in 8 years, it's going to be 9 years pretty quick. 9 years, I think I did a pretty good job of turning that all around, right? And a lot of people out there are saying, like, hey, what do you have out there to prove yourself? And I'm thinking, man, how many people out there can do it right now? Right? And I know not everybody can have a YouTube channel, but I work this YouTube channel like it was a second job. So I know a lot of people can take their effort beyond their day job and move into a position in which that they can also pay off their debts, save enough to buy real estate, buy into stocks and bonds, and try to figure out what it is that is best positioned for you to be in, because nobody's going to be living the same life. And this is what I'm figuring out and sharing with you guys. Yeah. And going back into history is probably one of the easiest ways to know why it is that we are sitting where we are today, why you are sitting where you are today. You got to think, like, YouTube doesn't drop this video to anybody just for any reason, man. It was brought to you for a reason. The reason is that you have to understand that there's underlying economic forces that are at play that I have discovered, that I can share with you, that then gives you a much better understanding of why it is that things are being conducted the way they are. And part of that is knowing that there is reasons why manufacturing leaves and why it's not coming back. Right? Cantillon describes it quite well. Let's check out some more of these super chats. Where is it? That was record. Oh, that was it. Okay, cool. Thank you guys so much for these super chats. I really appreciate it. We got $24.98 in super chats because you guys are always so generous. And you're always contributing to the Uneducated Economist, to make a better video, to get deeper into thought, to find the evidence, to share it with you guys in every way I can. And I really honestly believe that if you are going to make a better life for yourself, you really have to start making decisions based on an understanding from your own position. Because there's nobody else out there who can do this for you. That's what gets me. It's like, there's literally, like, you can find a financial advisor, and I bet anything that I could go to a financial advisor and tear them apart on their understanding of monetary policy, and I'm just some uneducated economist sitting in a 99 Ford Explorer who has this relentlessly torn this monetary policy apart. But financial advisors are trained differently to look at different things, to do different things, and I'm not saying they're not good at their job. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, if you're going to make decisions for yourself, then you might want to know how the monetary policy is operating so that you can base your decisions based on your understanding and not somebody else's, because their understanding is a very different view from yours. I know it is. All right, 160 people with 43 likes. Keep hitting the like button, everybody. Let's get it up to 160 likes. I want everybody to go out and hit the like button right now. What time is it? 28 minutes into this. How long are we going to go for? All right, the stock guy on Twitch, there is something about former drunks and addicts that gain a wonderful understanding of the economy. Yeah, and that's what I really encourage people who really want to understand how to invest, is to follow people who are really good at doing it, right? Like, I'm pretty happy with my position, and I've shared it with you. I don't try to, like, convince anybody that I know how to do this. That's not what I'm doing, right? That's like, there's other people out there who do like to share that information. They do like to know, like, they like to tell people how to understand it in a fashion that's better. That's great. Like, I'm so happy for them. I really hope that they go and do quite well with it. That's not for me to do. All right, good job and advice. No victim here. Yeah. Copy successful people. Yeah, well, and also understand that, there are people who have done it, and there are people who are doing it, and there's difference, right? People who have done it are people who are doing it, who have done it in a different time, right? When you are doing it in today's environment, which is very, very, in a lot of ways, harder and easier at the same time. As the divide gets worse, the inequality gets worse, the ability to actually gain wealth gets easier. And this is why it's becoming wider. It's the same reason. People who say don't try are going to be stuck on a bottom side of a wedge that is going to get very difficult to climb out of. But people who say, nah, this really isn't that hard and there's a lot of work to do, but with this work comes reward that I can then use to then propel myself to a position in which that I can live more independently, a happier life. I can actually expose myself to the luxurious experience that I have always wanted, right? Just know that it's going to create the divide and eventually decline. But, hey, everybody's human. You got to enjoy your luxuries. So just know it's hard, right? It's hard to get there, and it's good. And it's good that it's hard because if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Just look around at your competition. Nobody's doing it. So now think of how hard you have to work comparatively to the people around you who are not doing it. You don't really have to work that much harder than them. They're not doing anything. I mean, you think about it, they're almost stopped. So, I mean, just do a little bit at a time. One video at a time. All right. P. Buddigigi. I don't know who that guy is. Buddigigi. For the next Fed chairman. Why? Do you like the sound of his voice? Does he tell good jokes? That would be cool if we had a chairman that was really, really like comical up there and just told jokes the entire time. Because really, I don't really listen to the chairman anyway. I listen to the FOMC and what the voting members say, not to the media, but to their speeches, because what they say in their speeches has so much more of a better understanding of the monetary policy and the current strategies that they are using than the mainstream media, because that propagandized BS that you hear out there has no sense whatsoever to it. I'm a precious metal guy, 30% return so far this year. It's easier now than ever before just watching YouTube videos and invest more money than you spend. It's wealth inequality required to run the economy to some degree. Is wealth inequality required to run the economy to some degree? No. You have to understand why we are sitting in the situation we are in, because most people think, okay, well, maybe we need this. This is the way it's set up. This is all that. Okay, that's not the way it works. All right. Cantillon describes this quite well, and I've broken this down so many times. And if you actually become a member of the channel, I saw somebody did actually become a member of the channel earlier, and thank you very much for, it's $1 a month, literally $1 a month, get you access to some speeches and breakdowns of speeches that I have done that gives you such a better understanding of what's going on within the economy. But even just recently, I had broken down 3 chapters out of the Cantillon essay. The Cantillon essay is linked down in the description of this video. It's an Amazon affiliate link. By using the Amazon affiliate link to buy the essay, I get a little commission off of it. But you don't have to buy the essay off of Amazon. You can get it for free at the Mises Institute. Just go down there, click on that link, and look on how to spell Cantillon, and then go and put that into the Google search, and you'll find that Mises Institute has the PDF for free. You can go and download and read it at your leisure without having to pay a dime for it. All right, so that's the way to get it. But if you click on that Amazon affiliate link and put anything in your cart for the next 24 hours, I will also get a commission for all those little items that you put into your cart after clicking on that Amazon affiliate link down in the description. That will lead you to the essay on Cantillon's economic theory. So thank you very much for that little plug there. And now, understanding that there is 3 chapters in that essay. It's part 2 of the essay, chapter 6, 7, and 8, increase and decrease of money to the state and further reflections upon that topic. Now, in these 3 chapters, he very thoroughly, it'll take you the afternoon, not even the afternoon to read through them. I think I did it in a live stream one day. I broke down all three speeches, or all 3 chapters. So it's pretty easy. Go through those chapters and you are going to see exactly what happens when new money supply starts to come into an economy. Now, whether that's done through what Cantillon describes as silver mine, but it can be from production, it can be coming from transportation, it can come from war effort, it can come from all kinds of places, debt issuance, right? There's all different ways of bringing new money into the system. Now, when you bring new money into the system, no matter what you do, no matter what, The new money comes into the system. The people who have first access to that money are going to spend it at face value. And now what ends up happening is that is going to increase consumption because people who have first access to it start to increase their consumption. The people who have gotten the money from the people who have got first access to it, they increase their consumption, and so on down the line it goes. And the people at the very end, they suffer the most because all this added consumption starts to increase the prices. Now as the prices start to increase, what ends up happening is that the domestic manufacturers start to say, hey, your increased prices are now so elevated that we can ship to your location some of those same products and actually may even get it to you for a cheaper price. Now, if you are a manufacturing state who has been shipping out products to get new money in, and all of a sudden there is a foreign manufacturer who starts to produce the same things that you are producing, you may not necessarily be in competition in the sense that you're going to be buying their production, but they just stop buying yours, and that's less new money coming in. Right? You see how this works? See, this doesn't really have anything to do with politics yet. And you can blame politics all you want. That's fine. Go ahead and, go into the debates and theories and lectures and, probably like endless amounts of, you know, university classes or something that talk about this. But this is really how it goes down, is that it's an underlying economic force. So as the foreign producers start to produce the same things that are in a more luxurious nation who has been gathering wealth from their high-end production, that has now got foreigners competing with them, and start sending them foreign production and start exporting their money. You see how this is working here? So now this is the situation we now face here in the United States, because this is exactly what we went through. We went through a manufacturing revolution that produced the world's greatest stuff. We sent that stuff out there to the world. The world sent us their money. We increased our standard of living. We increased our standard of living and started buying the foreign production of other nations. When we started buying the foreign production of other nations, our domestic manufacturers couldn't compete. They started moving their production over to those foreign nations where they could produce at a cheaper price. New money kept pouring in because instead of shipping them all our gold, we shut that off with the Nixon era, and then moved into a fiat, 100% fiat debt-based currency, which allowed us to print as much money as we wanted, which then allowed us to continue to shove debt into the people who continued to consume, to continue to buy the foreign production, which continued to send our domestic manufacturers overseas. Now, if you want to blame Nixon, okay, that's the political part that would probably be the biggest impact. But ultimately, to understand that it was an underlying economic force that forced him to do that. And if he had allowed the underlying economic forces to take place, we would be suffering in pain and misery. Don't think that it can't happen. The underlying economic forces are still there. You turn off that new money supply, we all fall into pain and misery. Everybody does. Right? If you are not prepared for that situation, then you are going to suffer the consequences from that. That's why you have to be in gold and silver, and to a lesser extent, Bitcoin. But gold and silver is the only thing that gets you out of that third-party claim. It's the only thing that steps you away from the stock market, from the fiat currency, from the Federal Reserve, from the government. It's the only thing that gets you away from it. And to think that there is some way of fixing it, or that it needs to be there, or that there's some way that we can create a society that makes it more acceptable for everybody to live in, I think is going to be very difficult and hard pressed to get to. You'll be waiting a really, really, really long time. And it's going to be dark and cold and difficult and frustrating. And I think it's going to be much easier to just say, it's just the way it is. And it's going to get harder. You think, like, if you think inequality is bad now, if they do not figure out a way, right? And I don't mean they figure out a way. What I'm saying, they, the people, the lower end people, not they, the people who have all the money, if they do not figure out a way to generate more of a way to be in that capitalist position, to be the property owner, they are going to have to suffer with their efforts being all they got in order to live. And it's going to be hard. Right? I mean, just think about it. Is it getting any easier? It's getting easier for some people who can figure it out, but who are those people? Capitalists and property owners. They're the people who are figuring it out. There are some very industrious people out there who become very good business owners, but in a sense, they're capitalist mindset in itself, redeploying that money back into their business, making their business grow, franchising out, ever increasing it. These are generally people who take their savings and move it into a position in which that they do get a return on that capital. Business owners are generally, for the most part, if they are doing good at their business, are somewhat already in the capitalist property owner mindset. This isn't difficult, guys, but it is important that there is no way that there is going to be something out there that you can vote for or expect to change that is going to make it awesome for everybody. And so knowing that isn't the case, might as well abandon the idea and say, okay, well, what is it that I do need to do in order to make this work for me? That's the important part. I had somebody say it the other day. It was just like, well, I already work all these hours and I can't make it, and 16 hours a day. And I'm thinking, you work 16 hours a day and you can't make it? Like, what the hell? Like, where the hell are you rent? Like, how little of an income are you making in which you work 16 hours every single day and you still can't make it? I think that's not right. I think maybe some days you work 16 hours. But if you're working 16 hours every single day, well, then all you need is a place to lay down for 8 hours, because really you're not doing anything else. There's no point in having anything else. Huh? Why are you even renting a place? You don't even rent a place. You just, like, you lay down in your car and fall asleep. There's no point in having anything else. It doesn't make any sense 16 hours a day unless you are sitting at home. Huh? And then you're working money into a internet business, and you are spending time trying to build that up and deploying that effort all over the place. Well, think about that. That's pretty cool to be able to do that. And if you're putting 16 hours a day into that, that's pretty amazing. And if you have conditioned yourself that you have to live that way, got to recondition that, man. Like, that's no way to live. I mean, I think you could probably take that effort and make it better for yourself. And I don't even know if that was real to begin with. But still, I think about that. It was just like, I don't know, man. I work a lot of hours myself, and I try to keep my expenses as low as possible. I'm super happy that, like, in a way, like, everything is about the meaning you give it, right? So my wife's car blew the transmission, and I still don't know what I'm going to do with that thing. But I just made the decision that I was just like, fine, I'm just going to get out of debt on this thing right now, because it is absolutely useless to me. And I'm making full coverage payments on it because it has a loan against it. So I paid the thing off, and I could not believe on how awesome the feeling is. Like, I already knew it was an awesome feeling to let go of the debt, but it's even more awesome right now because my insurance is coming due, and I know that that payment isn't on there. And it's just making me think, man, I can buy more stuff. I can buy more into whatever it is I'm buying into at the time. And that's literally how I think. I think about how it is that I can keep my expenses as low as possible. Thank you for joining the channel, everybody. I see there's a few of you who have joined in on this. This is awesome. You're really going to enjoy it. I'm going to start getting back into some of these speeches once the Federal Reserve starts giving a little bit more of them. We're going to have a major change, a major shift to the monetary policy coming up here this summer. Don't know exactly when, but the strategy on long-term strategy, which is like a 6-year long strategy that I mean, I don't know how many people actually are aware that they do that. Hold on, let me bring it up here so I can tell you what it is. It's called the Statement on Long-Run Goals and Monetary Policy Strategies. And this is also known as the Consensus Statement. This is going to change here this summer. right? And I think the important part of this is that there is certain words that are needing to either be there or change or be removed that we're looking for, right? And this is it, right? It says, in order to anchor long-term inflation expectations at this level, the committee seeks to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, and therefore judges that following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. I'm looking for that right there to change. Because right now, the Federal Reserve is sitting in a position in which that inflation is moderately above 2%, and it's been that way for some time. I don't know what that exactly means because they don't give us any kind of real definition of what moderately above 2% means or what some time means, but I'm assuming we're somewhat there, right? I just guessing, I don't know, right? The Fed doesn't, doesn't clarify any of that. However, this consensus statement or this statement on long-run goals and monetary policy strategies, this will be part of this shift in monetary policy that I believe will be taking place, or may not be. I don't know. Like we're going to find out more when this statement comes out. But I think this is something that we need to keep an eye on, and not a lot of people talk about it, right? We can hear the rumblings of Donald Trump talking about firing Jerome Powell, and I laugh so hard every time I hear one of these statements come out about how it is that he's going to replace Jerome Powell, or that he's going to fire Jerome Powell, or kick Jerome Powell out, or calling him a complete idiot, or all this other stuff. And he just rambles on and on and on about Jerome Powell. And there is literally nothing that Donald Trump can do about it. And I just I don't know how many times he has to go out there and talk about it to distract the people away from something that is real, but it seems to be working quite well. Like, if you were trying to create a distraction of complete nonsense that has no real change to anything that is being conducted as far as monetary policy, but certainly grabs the people's attention, this is it. I laugh. Literally, like there is nothing that can come from this. He has no way of doing anything outside of confirming the nomination. Right? I nominate that guy who is somebody who you're going to have to pick from because these guys are conditioned in order to be in that position. Yeah, it's like once you understand it, once you look at it and know how it takes place, once you have essentially sat in the room long enough because you've read through so many of their speeches, like this stuff that's coming out with the administration and talking about firing Jerome Powell, it's like his babbling on about this topic literally is a distraction. It's a distraction. It makes no sense. There's no point in debating it, contemplating it, putting energy or thought towards it because it is a pure distraction. It will not come about. The Fed is not set up like that. In fact, it's set up in a way that prevents the president from doing just what the president is wanting to do. All right. And once you know it, you can be like, okay, well, set that noise aside. Don't need to listen to it. What is he talking about? Jerome Powell? He's dumb. That's stupid. That's stupid. Yeah. Like every time he talks about how stupid Jerome Powell is, he's essentially talking about himself because there's really nothing he can do about it, and he knows it. And so he is literally just blabbering on about how stupid he really is, saying that I need to do something about it because he knows there's nothing he can do. So why are you distracting the people from some real topics that are out there instead of, going off on this stuff? Because it's all part of the game. It's all in order to create the fear, uncertainty, and doubt within this economy. Think about the tariffs in itself. I mean, I knew it from the very beginning when I said, what tariffs? We got to see what it is, what exemptions, what workarounds, what tariffs are actually going to take place. And then here we have months later, this taco trade acronym thing coming up, talking about how Trump always chickens out. And I'm like, no, damn it. Like these people are just falling into the game too. They're falling into the same beliefs and misunderstandings of what it is that's actually occurring out there that is giving the Federal Reserve all the power that they need in order to conduct themselves, which is not about their actions, which is more about their words. And look how well it's working for them. It works like swimmingly. And I know a lot of people have a hard time understanding it, and it's difficult to change your belief system. I know it, right? I mean, believe me, there was a time that I was very much deep into following the rabbit holes of the New World Order, following all that stuff. And here's the scariest part about it all is that most of it's real. It is. Like, I mean, almost everything that I researched and investigated and got deep into, and I don't like really talking about it, is real. And the reason why I don't like talking about it is because it'll really impact your life. And it really impacts your life in a way that deteriorates you, because that's what the New World Order is designed to do. As most people are looking at that and say, hey, man, this whole system is set up to end my way of existence and to make me a slave, to force me into this beast system, that ends up being what occurs. Yeah. What's going on? How come people are bailing out so quickly? Everyone faults everyone else. They fault capitalists, socialists, some boogeyman. Well, and that's just the problem. I think when you start to blame somebody else and you have to take on the idea that you can actually vote or have somebody in your life that is going to fix it, and there's nobody who's coming except for you. You're it. That's it. Right? And once you understand that there is nobody else who's going to come to save the day or make it any better or anything like that, like, it just doesn't exist in this fashion. Early bird, thank you so much. I mean, we want it to be. We want there to be a savior. We want there to be. And if you really take a look at most religions, that's ultimately what it is saying, right? Is that you can find this inner peace within you. And if you find it, then that is what is going to give you the happiness that you were really looking for. And it all comes from this divine spiritual feeling that you get. Do you think it is possible for individuals to resist or subvert the capitalist system? And if so, how? Okay, early bird, what do you think that would look like for the average everyday person? Right, to avert the capitalist system, because it's a capitalist system is essentially one in which that you allow people to deploy their capital and to get a return from that capital. And if you have enough people doing that, then you end up having the separation between the rich and the poor. And you can see from Cantillon's essay how they can become quite powerful, even more powerful than the property owners themselves. So do you really want to stop this from happening? Well, what would stop that from happening? You would have to have some sort of government control. Like, by stopping it from happening, you're essentially saying that you don't want to do it. Well, I mean, you may not want to do it, but then I do want to do it. Like, I don't want to necessarily have a wedge driven between the rich and the poor, but I also understand that this is a natural occurrence of economics. It's not something that you can stop or even try to control, because once you try to control it, the underlying economic forces grow and continue to get worse. Like, once you turn the new money off, if you turn the new money off coming into this system, you're going to find some intense poverty and misery come about. Like, serious, intense poverty and misery. Because the underlying economic forces have made it so big. Right? Like, if you continue to issue new money into the system and the new money is then being deployed into manufacturing of actual labor, energy, and resources of foreign nation, and they're sending that to you, and all of a sudden that turns off, your way of life goes to hell fast. And that's exactly what would happen if you turn the new money off, right? Man, I love babbling on this stuff. Okay, where are we at here? So, okay. And so, okay, here, like, what would it be because we're talking about how it is that we don't actually have this major deviation, but everybody can live this wonderful, beautiful life together. Okay. I drive a 99 Explorer, a 97 Suburban, and a 2001 S10. I have no intentions on buying anything new, right? I do have intentions on buying something new at some point. I really do. I will have a new car. I will move into that luxurious experience. But these cars work. They travel down the road. They're safe. They're reliable enough. And so I'm not stressing getting a new vehicle. Now, what does that mean for my move into luxurious experiences? Where does that leave me? Like, I don't have to move my money into foreign production, which would cause the manufacturing base here in the United States to get worse because I buy foreign production. I'm not buying that foreign production. I'm not buying anything. Okay. I take that money and I move it into investment and I put it into savings. So now we think about what built a strong economy, right? Manufacturing, producing, being industrious, saving, investing. This is what built a strong economy. What's building a weak economy is debt issuance, consuming. Right? This is what the economy that we now live in. All right. So if you were to try and change this around, to try and make it better, what is it that the individual has to really do? Right? You have to not spend your money on luxurious experiences. And you justifying the new car to say that it's reliable and that it's safe and all that other stuff, I understand. I want a new car and I will justify the experience the same. Well, maybe not the same as you do, but I'll justify the experience of buying the new car as well. And if I have other running vehicles at the time, it will be a luxurious experience by doing it. So knowing that, right? The meaning that you have given behind whatever reason it is that you are putting your money towards it, that is you. I can't tell you how to give that meaning to it. Now, if you need the new car because it is very important to you, and if you don't have that new car, you're going to feel very insecure about your life. I I don't know how to fix that, man. Like I really don't. Like I don't know what it is that you can do to try and make that a better experience for you to not have your feel like your life is depleted without a new car. But, I mean, maybe that's an issue for you that you could fix and then you wouldn't have this issue anymore and then you could, I'm not saying you personally, I'm just saying in general if that was to be taking place out there, you know what I'm kidding. But you guys see where I'm getting at. I mean, you personally have to take on your own idea of what it is that you are doing that is separating yourselves from the poor. I don't try to go out there and buy new cars. If everybody was to go out there and try and buy new cars, what happens to the price of new cars? It goes up. Then it becomes very expensive to own a new car. And then you find out that if you don't have the ability to own a new car outright, you'll probably never own a new car because new cars don't really last long enough for you to pay them off anyway. I mean, I don't know, they might. I'm just saying that, most people don't have new cars long enough. They just constantly trading them in for new cars. And so ultimately it comes down to the people who can afford new cars, which is the people who are enjoying luxurious experiences, and everybody else suffers a consequence and has to do with Uber, right? Or do Uber in order to have the new car. Just know that it's happening. I see it. I could go buy a new car, but I don't. Why? Because I would much rather build up on my assets that are eventually going to have some sort of return to me. And then maybe someday I can buy as many new cars as I want. But at this point, I have that mindset that as little expenses as possible. And the less that you move into luxurious experiences, the less inequality takes place. You're not going to stop people from doing that. I've made that decision for myself because of how I want to position myself. But to think that there is going to be a society built on people who have actively made a decision to not move into the purchase of a new vehicle is crazy. It's not going to happen, right? And I don't believe it's going to happen. And I'm not going to try and push for a power pendulum that creates an idea that says we should get people to do this. I'm not going to do that. Right? I know for a fact everybody who has the ability to go out and buy a new car, who desires one, is going to go get it. Very few people are going to actively say, nah, I'm going to hold back and make sure that I save and reinvest, because that's what builds a strong economy. I mean, I can't make people make the right decision, but I can tell you that if you have the ability to buy into a luxurious experience, whether it's through debt issuance or just in the abundance of wealth, that's what they're most likely going to do. And very few people hold back from that. Oh, what time is it? An hour into this. Man, I just babbled right along, didn't I? Ben, thank you so much for the $1.99. Wealth inequality predates the Federal Reserve. Absolutely it does. That's why I keep bringing up the Cantillon essay, because it explains how it happens. Right? It explains how it happens and how the new money turning off will essentially drive everybody into poverty and misery. And that's why I kind of laugh about it. It was just like, I'm down for ending the Fed. Like, I am so down for it. The only problem with that is that I think that 99% of the people will have no idea on how to conduct themselves without a central banking system supplying the ever-increasing amount of debt issuance so that everybody can do the amount of transactions in their life to give them the feeling of comfort and wealth that they so rightfully deserve as Americans. I don't know how to explain it, but ultimately, if you end the Federal Reserve, everybody's going to be crying in the streets because they have no idea on how to deal with the fact that the Federal Reserve no longer buys anything, and that the few people out there who truly understood what it would be like to live without a dollar-based system or a fiat currency system, and what it would be like to be doing transactions with gold and silver and Bitcoin, because you've actually actively done it and you know how to do the networking and understanding of it. Those are the few people who are probably well aware of how that they would conduct, how they would conduct themselves in a situation such as that. And again, most people wouldn't know what to do. They would be screaming for somebody else to do something because they have no idea what to do. And that's panic. Essentially, people will panic. Yeah. Man, thank you everybody for the super chats, man. This is great. Thank you. Make this live stream really really awesome tonight. All right, early bird, thank you again for the $5. But previous generations did have the ability to take vacations and buy luxuries. Is what we're seeing now a failure of late stage capitalism? No. What you're seeing, this okay, so we have to go back and we have to understand that when you have a manufacturing base that is leaving, this isn't capitalism doing this. This is, again, like Cantillon is describing exactly what is happening when new money comes in, right? As new money comes in, the separation between the rich and the poor takes place. So now, if you are an industrious person, think about it for yourself. If you, actually, let's go back to the American story again, right? So here you have the United States. We're producing all the world's greatest stuff. We sent that stuff out there to the world. What did the world send us? Gold, right? They sent us their gold. And the United States accumulated a lot of gold. Now, what ends up happening when you have a lot of gold? What happens when you have a lot of savings? You move into a luxurious experience, right? You want a nicer house, nicer car, nicer vacation, nicer stuff, right? But on your way up, you're able to save. Now, if you're in a saving mindset because you just went through a Great Depression and you have been punished pretty bad, but you're able to now have a decent job that has a decent return and you have a decent income and you're getting a decent life because of that income, where your paycheck is able to buy a house, and not only buy a house, but it's providing enough for your wife and kids and all the other stuff that you have going on in your life because your manufacturing job is producing stuff that you're sending out there to the world, and the world is sending you the gold, and this is increasing your lifestyle. Now, the better house that you have, the better car that you have, the better furniture that you have, this is added consumption. As you increase the consumption, what ends up happening? supply-demand imbalances. So as the supply-demand imbalances begin to take place because all these people are increasing their consumption, and although, yes, it's true, we can increase our manufacturing, but what ends up happening is the supply-demand imbalances that are occurring because of the manufacturing base that we already have, that we're supplying to the world. So we're already producing more than we need for ourselves because we wouldn't be able to supply the world unless we did, is now bringing the prices up ever higher. That means the world says, hey, you know what? We're going to start producing for ourselves. That means we can't send them stuff. Well, that's cool. We're producing for ourselves. We got all this money, right? And not only are we dealing with the fact that they're like, hey, we're becoming manufacturers, our stuff is better than their stuff, right? Well, pretty soon they're getting pretty good at it. And it's like, hey, how much are you selling that stuff for? Pretty cheap. We'll take some of that foreign production. Why don't you send it on over and here's some of that gold back? Well, what happens if you continuously buy that foreign production because your standard of living is elevated, and the best thing in the world is to increase your standard of living, which means that you're going to be buying even more foreign production, and the worst thing in the world is to lower your standard of living, which would mean that you would back off on that foreign production. Which direction do you think that people are going to be headed? I mean, think about right now when you lower your standard of living, how painful of an experience that is, and how uptight you would see other people think that even just a small diminishment in their standard of living would be. Horrible. But increase their standard of living and they're all the way down for it. So increasing the standard of living is super easy, and the only way you're going to increase your standard of living is to have more, nicer foreign production. So the more you bring in the foreign production, the more you're going to export your gold. Eventually, you're going to export it all and you're going to fall into pain and misery. So you could say, nah, I'm going to turn that off and I'm going to turn on the debt printer and just issue out a bunch of debt and fiat currency. And then the foreign production continues to come in while the printed up money, the fiat currency, continues to be exported. Well, if people have ever increasing amounts of access to money, what are they going to do with it? They're going to continue to buy the foreign production, which pours in a magnificent way now. And this is creating the luxurious experience that we have here in the United States. It's like, you can't stop it. This is, and I don't know. I mean, try it. Try stopping it. I don't know. I mean, Cantillon described this hundreds of years ago and described it from hundreds of years before that. And I imagine it's probably going to happen 100 years from now. I don't know why you're going to want to try and stop it. I think it was just better to understand why it's taken place so that you can position yourself for it. I think that would be better. Right? Because then you don't have to try and change anything except for your understanding and the meaning that you're giving stuff. And because if you think that you can vote for somebody and then sit back and then be cool, I don't know, maybe you are cool. I don't know, why do you have to vote for anybody? You're already cool. You don't have to change anything about that, right? But if you want anything in your life and you want it to be better, then you are going to have to make decisions for yourself based on your understanding of what it is that's happening out there, and understanding that there is nobody coming to fix the situation. So you have to understand that there is no way that the inequality is going to diminish. It's going to get worse. And if you are working every single day thinking, man, my day job will be enough, it won't be. It's obvious now. I mean, you can see it with the attempt to try and become a property owner. It's almost impossible. The only way to become a property owner is to be a capitalist first. And here it is, the ability to become a capitalist is so easy. Think about it. Cantillon described it. At times, the capitalists are trying to become property owners, and the property owners are trying to become the capitalist. Well, right now, it's almost impossible to become a property owner, but it's super easy to become a capitalist. Yeah. Which one are you going to try and choose? The side that says, I'm not going to do either one of those, and I'm going to try and vote for somebody that says, no, I just make it so my life is awesome. Thanks. I'll see you later. I mean, which one of those is going to work out? All right. I really appreciate all the super chats. I hope I don't like sound condescending or something like that, man. I really do appreciate everything you guys are doing for the Uneducated Economist. And I'm just trying to give it to you raw, and I'm not going to sugarcoat anything, you know? Here you are again, bro. All right. Thank you, Early Bird, for the $5 again. Does globalism function as a lowering the quality of life in the first world while raising it in the third world, eventually creating the equilibrium? No, I mean, I think the rise of other nations out there actually only benefits to the United States as there's more innovations, products, and energy, labor, and resources drawn from those nations and moved into the United States with less effort coming from the United States itself as more and more of these emerging nations are able to do this. Now, the problem that I think a lot of people end up seeing from this is that they blame the government for some sort of like world takeover or whatever, while very few recognize that this exact effort is the reason why they live such a luxurious, abundant life here in the United States, is because of the efforts of all these other nations out there sending their labor, energy, and resources to the United States and essentially trading it for worthless paper. I mean, empty paper promises to pay in the future with more empty paper promises. I don't know how it is that we are getting the raw end of the deal on that. I mean, running trade deficits when you are like essentially sending them nothing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know who's ripping off who here, but anyway, everybody takes it for what it is, and I don't try to give it the meaning that it's good or bad or ugly. It's just the way it is. And to take advantage of this situation means that not only do you have to have a day job, but then you also have to have other income until you figure out a way to live as an entrepreneur or a capitalist or a property owner. A day job isn't bad, all right? Being stuck at your day job sucks. But if you have a day job and then you have a side hustle or side business and a side gig or some sort of way of being able to generate some sort of revenue outside of your day job doesn't seem so bad anymore. In fact, it turns into something you're choosing to do as opposed to something you have to do. And if it's something that you're choosing to do as opposed to having to do, well, then it becomes a lot easier to do it and you enjoy it and you don't mind being there because you don't have to be there. You're choosing to be there, and that's a whole different meaning that you're giving your job. Thank you all for being here. $41.90 because you guys are always so awesome and generous here on the Uneducated Economist with 153 people watching and 104 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. We got an hour and 12 minutes into this live stream. I don't know, how long do you guys want to go for? We got 160 people watching and 104 likes. You get it up to 150 in the next 15 minutes or so, and we'll call it good. We'll stick around, but then we'll call it good there. That would be awesome. But if you get 150, we'll keep going. All right, the Fed is printing up the difference of the trade deficit. Surprised? All right, you're stuck in the past. All right, I work labor. I'm not tired. I'm not too tired for a side hustle. All right, thank you. What is it, Micah? All right, thank you for joining the channel. I really appreciate everybody who's been a member. I haven't done a members only live stream for a little while, but they are really good informative videos. I've done a couple of bingo live streams for you guys just to try and put something out there for the members only to give them a little bit of entertainment on there. But ultimately, I think it's a very serious way of bringing the understanding of the monetary policy into a tighter community who is really breaking this credible threat theory down and internalizing it in a way that I don't even think I have truly gotten a full grasp of. I think that there's people out there who have started to not only like taken my theory to a different level inside of it, because you think about it, there's people out there who really know how to do some serious research, right? I mean, I'm just the uneducated economist. I barely graduated high school. I didn't go to college for any of this stuff. It's just me and the internet trying to figure this stuff out. And when I started showing people how this works, and I'm talking like, some pretty smart individuals, even college professors and stuff like that, on what it is that I was seeing out there. I could only imagine that if there was somebody out there who could really do some serious, intense research within the idea of what this credible threat theory really is, I think that they could probably come up with some really deep understanding of this stuff, right? Way better than even I have. I mean, I really feel like I just scratched the surface of it, even with all the, with all the information that I've tried to bring to it. Well, I will say this: when you bring someone wine, they tip really well. All right, I'm 31 and I'm more so mentally exhausted. I just want a proper man to marry, have one kid with, and convince to go back to my home state with him. Well, I mean, Heather, I don't think you're asking too much. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you're supposed to find your prime partner inside of life outside of just feel the energy of already having received your perfect relationship and live the life as if that's already existing, because the energy that you live is the one that you will eventually experience. And when you don't feel it right in the beginning, it's the tension that you need to lean into in order to acquire those things. I think a lot of people suffer the same problem. Like the idea, I just want to marry, is like as if this thing is outside of reach. And, to really understand that the energy of being married is already there and existing within you. And if you carry that energy, the proper person that is totally meant for you will just eventually present itself to you inside of the world of everybody else sharing the same energies. Yours, right, will eventually go out there and attract the right one. It just takes time for it to happen. It's the same thing that how you generate money, right? You can't just expect that you're going to get it. I mean, I guess some people can, but you're just not going to expect that you can make $1 million tomorrow. But tomorrow you can expect to be on the path to making $1 million. And you can also feel like you have already done the work that it takes to make the $1 million. You just have to keep making those steps towards acquiring the $1 million, because the work of what it is that needs to make the $1 million has already been done, because you're now on the steps to getting it, right? The work was trying to figure out how it was you're going to take the steps. Once you are in motion and start moving towards that $1 million and not really thinking about like the actual timing of it, but just knowing that it's going to be acquired some point in the future, because you are moving in the right direction of it, because you're carrying the energy of it, because you're doing the right business that's going to get you there. And eventually you will find yourself having either acquired it or being very much on the path of having received the things in your life as if you had the million. You see what I'm getting at? Like, what if you traveled anywhere you wanted? What if you had all the food you could ever want? What if you were, doing the things that you could ever imagined yourself doing? And you're thinking, well, if I had $1 million, I would be able to do those things. But if you were doing those things and you didn't have the $1 million, wouldn't that be the same? Does having the $1 million in the bank the same thing that doing what $1 million could do for you? Because when people say, I want $1 million, what are they saying? I want to do what $1 million can do. I can want to spend $1 million. That's what they're saying. But when I think about having $1 million, I think about the work it takes to have $1 million, not what I can do with it. There's a difference inside of that, right? So when I think about having the $1 million and what that can do for me, that's a huge difference from having the $1 million, having what it takes to work for it. When I think about what it would be like to have $1 million and what I could do with it, that's a whole different feeling. And I think to myself, well, I get to do whatever I want. Isn't that the feeling of having $1 million? I mean, I think that's ultimately what people would think. They're saying, hey, if I have $1 million, I get to do whatever I want. I feel that way. So I already feel like I have the $1 million. I don't think about it. I really don't. I am like one of the few people, even a guy was like, man, I'm really excited. I want to talk to you about sponsors. This is going to be really awesome. And I'm like, all right, cool. Right. I mean, I'm literally, let's do it. I'm going to keep a very cool, chill profile, chill attitude, chill with everything, because I already feel like I got everything I could ever want. There's literally nothing out there that I can't just, well, I mean, there's some things obviously to reason, but if you already feel like you have it, then I tell you, desire is really what is the painful experience in your life. And if you don't desire anything, or you recognize that when you do desire something, it's usually ends up being frustrating and painful and just not even benefit to your life in any way. So don't desire anything. Desire is the root of all pain. Pain and suffering. All right, more Mike. Thank you so much for the joining the channel. I bought $90 worth of Bitcoin today. Right on. I bought $50 worth yesterday. 60K is livable wage most everywhere, so only 1 million from freedom. I guess, I don't know. Is 60K really a livable wage? Because I tell you, I'm trying to have a family, and if it was just me by myself and I didn't have anybody to try and create good memories for and have a decent life with plenty of food and recreation things and all the stuff going on, I don't know how the hell people make it. Like, I don't get it. Like, I think about all the different channels of revenue that I bring in and how cut back on my expenses that I try to live and still bring my family. And it's like, wow. It's like, I don't understand how people buy new cars. Like, I'll see a brand new truck and a brand new car in the driveway, and I think to myself, dang, like, I thought I did pretty well, but what the hell are you guys earning? Or is it that deep into debt? Is this leased vehicles and you're just stretched out every month? Maybe that's it. Like, I'm not stretched out every month. Like, at the end of the month, I got the money to pay the bills and all that other stuff. So I don't stress it that way. And I usually have enough money that I can dollar cost average and then save a little bit of money as well on top of it. And so that's a pretty good position to be in. And some people might call it lucky. And I think to myself, nah, it's being disciplined and it's being dedicated and it's hard and it's building stuff piece by piece, just like I believe everybody else should do. But, it's not easy. Right? And occasionally, very occasionally, you get to cruise up to Seattle for a couple of the Seattle Red Sox Mariner games. Or Seattle Mariners Red Sox games. There we go. I fumble my words up. All right, let's continue on here. Did I get a super chat in there somewhere? Did I miss? There it is, Ben, $4.99. Do you think that relying so much on foreign imports does hurt us since it offshores production and contributes to shrinking the middle class and jobs? Well, absolutely it does. But again, that's because you position yourself in order to rely upon the manufacturing jobs. I mean, when you say we, you're talking collectively. Yeah, a good economy is built on a strong middle class from production and savings. But that doesn't exist. So when you say, isn't it good? Yeah, of course it's good, but there's no way we can go back to it. It's a cycle that we are heading down the road. So to understand that the deficit that we are now experiencing in trade is part of this cycle, and eventually the new money will turn off and we will all fall into pain and misery. I think this is one of the desperate attempts of the Federal Reserve and the government to try and establish this stable coin so that they could take interest rates into negative territory in order to continue on with the Federal Reserve System. Now, I've gone over this one in a deeper video just, I don't know, last week or something like that, and it's something that I've actually brought up like 7 years ago when I first started this channel, and that is the idea that the Federal Reserve cannot conduct their monetary policy in the way that most people have understood the Federal Reserve, and that is through the interest rate adjustments. When they hit the lower bound of zero, they were done. That was it. It was over. Nobody knows that. I mean, the Fed knows it. The Fed says it. Ben Bernanke said it. I mean, all these people talked about it within the Federal Reserve, but they didn't communicate it in a way that says, "Oh shit, like they didn't do it like that." Of course not, right? They kept it very quiet and concealed in how they communicated out there. But Ben Bernanke knew way back in 2001 or 2002 that they would be facing a situation when they hit the lower bound in a few years, because they knew it was coming, right? They knew it. And that when they hit that lower bound, that their monetary policy was over. He said it years before it took place. I mean, hold on one second. Let me tell you. Oh, where is it? Deflation's sufficient magnitude may result in a nominal interest rate declining to zero or very close to zero. This is the Federal Reserve and the Fed funds rate going to zero interest rate policy. This is what the Federal Reserve was experiencing after the great financial crisis. This is 5 years before that happened. 4 years before that happened. Says deflation of sufficient magnitude may result in a nominal interest rate declining to zero or very close to zero. Once the nominal interest rate is at zero, no further downward adjustment in rates can occur, since lenders generally will not accept a negative nominal interest rate when it's possible instead to hold cash. Bang. That's why they're establishing the stablecoin, so they can take interest rates into negative territory. All right. Why would you hold a negative interest rates in your account when you can simply hold cash? But if you're stuck in a stablecoin, cryptocurrency, central bank digital currency, you will not be able to hold cash, and then they can take interest rates into negative territory. He goes on to say, at this point, nominal interest rates is said to have hit the zero bound. Goes on to say this, because central banks conventionally conduct monetary policy by manipulating the short-term nominal interest rates, some observers have concluded that when the key rate stands at or near zero, central banks have, quote, run out of ammunition. Right? They're done. That's it. Quote, ran out of ammunition. That is, it no longer has the power to expand aggregate demand and hence economic activity. See, this is how few people realize that, or how few people understand that the great financial crisis, when the Federal Reserve took interest rates to zero, that they knew it was going to happen 4 or 5 years earlier. Like, you think about it, Ben Bernanke had to write the speech, so he had to have already understood and thought about it well ahead of time. So they knew that when that interest rate hit the lower bound of zero, they were out of ammunition. They were cooked. Right? It is true that once policy rate has been driven down to zero, a central bank can no longer use its traditional means of stimulating aggregate demand and thus will be operating in less familiar territory. See, this is how they have changed. They moved away from their traditional means. Nobody thinks about how it is that they moved away from their traditional means. They still think about in the Fed in a traditional manner. And here Ben Bernanke, 23 years ago, right, was saying that they were no longer going to be using their traditional means. And I have been trying to share with you how it is that they no longer use their traditional means. They use untraditional means, right? The central bank's inability to use its traditional methods may complicate the policy-making process and introduce uncertainty in the size and timing of the economy's response to policy actions. Hence, I agree that the situation is one to be avoided if possible. It wasn't avoided. They ran right into it. They nailed it big time during the great financial crisis. Okay. Here's the thing, guys. Ben knew this. This is why I keep trying to share this with you guys. When Ben shared this idea, nobody picked it up. And I have found many people who have found this speech but miss this part. They talk about this speech. So many people have. Like, I have found articles and other economists and all kinds of people talking about this speech, but they never, ever, 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 ever talk about this part. And I don't get why. It's the most important part of the entire speech. It's as if they want to show you the evidence and then dismiss it. It's like they like, here, check it out. I showed it to you. Look at all this stuff talking about the hit the lower bound zero, blah, 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 blah. See, I showed you the evidence, you saw it. But they didn't show you this. This is back to Ben Bernanke's speech. Let me start with some general observations about monetary policy at the zero bound, sweeping under the rug for a moment some technical and operational issues. As I have mentioned, some observers have concluded that when the central bank's policy rates fall to zero, now you're thinking central banks, not talking about them by themselves, they're talking about the globe, all the central bankers around the world experiencing the same situation. As I have mentioned, some observers have concluded that when the central bank's policy rates fall to zero, its practical minimum, monetary policy loses its ability to further stimulate aggregate demand and the economy. At a broad conceptual level and, in my view, in practice as well, this conclusion is clearly mistaken. Dun, dun, dun. See this? This is why this is the most important part of the speech that nobody seems to want to communicate to you. I do. Like, I want to communicate it. I got 162 people who want to hear it too. Indeed, under a fiat, that is paper, monetary system, a government, in practice, the central bank, in cooperation with other agencies should always be able to generate increased nominal spending and inflation. Oh, you need to increase inflation, right? Because deflation was the problem. Even when the short-term nominal interest rate is at zero, how do you create inflation when the interest rate is at zero? And you cannot find it. The great financial crisis, interest rates, the zero interest rate policy had the Fed funds rate operating at the lower bound for almost 10 years, and it failed to create an inflationary scenario. What was it that Ben Bernanke was relying on at the time for their new exceptional, untraditional tool to deal with the fact that they were going to be operating at the lower bound of zero? What then, when interest rates are at zero? The conclusion that deflation is always reversible under a fiat money system follows from some basic economic reasoning. A little parable may prove useful. Today, an ounce of gold sells for $300 more or less. Now suppose that a modern alchemist solves his subject's oldest problem by finding a way to produce unlimited amounts of new gold at essentially no cost. Moreover, his invention is widely publicized and scientifically verified, and he announces his intention to begin massive production of gold within days. You hear what he has for an idea on what they are going to use for monetary policy? He goes into this parable about a gold machine, a hypothetical gold machine. Right? Now, why did he talk about this hypothetical gold machine? Presumably, the potentially unlimited supply of cheap gold would cause the market price of gold to plummet. Indeed, if the market for gold is any degree efficient, the price of gold would collapse immediately after the announcement of the invention, before the alchemist had produced and marketed a single ounce of the yellow metal. He didn't have to produce anything. They could adjust the price of gold just simply by making the announcement, scientifically verified and proved, publicly. What was it? Widely publicized? Is that what it says? Moreover, his invention is widely publicized. What does this have to do with monetary policy? Like gold, U.S. dollars have value only to the extent that they are strictly limited in supply. But the U.S. government has the technology called the printing press, or today, its electronic equivalent, that allows it to produce as many U.S. dollars as it wishes at essentially no cost. By increasing the number of U.S. dollars in circulation, or even credibly threatening to do so. The U.S. government can also reduce the value of dollars in terms of goods and services, which is equivalent to raising the prices in dollars of those goods and services. we conclude that under a paper money system, a determined government can always generate higher spending and hence positive inflation. The credible threat of them producing an unlimited amount of dollars being pushed into the system creates an inflationary scenario that saves the monetary policy. That's ultimately what that says. And knowing that they were using that monetary policy for the previous 10, almost 15 years now, and that gaining their ammunition back is not the useful tool that they now use. That's the traditional method that everybody is stuck on. They now communicate all their monetary policy through propagandized information being deployed through the mainstream media. That's how it's being done. And you can find evidence of that even in today's speeches given by Phillips Jefferson, who's done a great job with two different speeches where he actually breaks this down, where he talks about monetary policy being conducted through their words as opposed to their actions, because all the talk about his monetary policy is about the communications and nothing about the action. I think this is probably some profound information to internalize, to know it, right? This speech here, reading between the lines, textual analysis of central bank communication, I think this is so important. February 21st, 2025, he gave this speech. And he said this: using textual analysis, high-frequency asset price data, and high-frequency central bank communication data, this research shows that investors' reactions to specific sentences communicated by the central bank are quickly incorporated into asset prices. Tell me, with this day and age of AI algorithms and everything that is now out there as far as breaking these speeches and communications and market reactions down, that they have not figured out exactly what specific sentences to deploy to alter, to be quickly incorporated into asset prices. Of course they know. They say they know. I mean, they say it right there. They, using textual analysis, high-frequency asset price data, and high-frequency central bank communication data, this research shows that investors' reactions to specific sentences communicated by the central bank are quickly incorporated into asset prices. All right? Tell me they're not using their communications when they say they're using their communications. People say they don't know what they're doing, and I'm thinking, really? Because they seem to be communicating something very differently. They seem to know exactly what they're doing, right down to knowing what the specific sentences to deploy. That's kind of know what you're doing, doesn't it? I mean, I would think they would know what they were doing. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're just making that up. Goes on to say this: policymakers know that their communications are likely to affect the course of short-term interest rates. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you moved the Fed funds rate for the short-term interest rates. No, it's not. It's policymakers know that the communications are likely to do it. Oh, I mean, everybody else, 99% of the people seem to think that it's adjustment of the Fed funds rate that adjusts the short-term interest rates, but you seem to think that it's your communications, because that's ultimately what it is now. It's all about their communications. Policymakers know that their communications are likely to affect the course of short-term interest rates, other asset prices, and the associated economic outlook, resulting in an easing or tightening of financial conditions. People want to know how it is that the Federal Reserve is conducting themselves. Easing and tightening of financial conditions that are being done through the communications of the policymakers, and they know exactly what specific sentences to use. And how many people want to tell you that they know exactly what they are doing, and they got 99% of the people buffaloed? How many people want to tell you that? None. Everybody wants to tell you they know exactly what the Federal Reserve is doing, and I'm telling you, this is what the Federal Reserve is doing through their own words. It's not even me saying it, right? It's not me saying it. I didn't say this. This is Philip Jefferson saying this. He said it February, what was it? When did he say this? February something. February 21st, 2025, reading between the lines, textual analysis of central bank communications. Remarks of Philip Jefferson's Vice Chair, Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System at the Macroeconomics Monetary Policy Conference, Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. Okay? Not me, it's them. I didn't make this stuff up. I'm just trying to share what it is that I found with you guys. And it's good stuff, right? I mean, once you see it this way, it's like, wow, man, I'm looking at the Federal Reserve in a much different fashion now. I'm listening and waiting for the specific sentences that they're using that are going to get quickly incorporated into asset prices, and I'm going to think about this much differently than they don't know what they're doing. Or even better yet, Jerome Powell's a complete moron, doesn't know what he's doing. If the Federal Reserve was being led by Donald Trump, things would be much different. And that whole noise will absolutely distract you from the truth of the matter. Right? How long do you guys want to hang out for? We got quite a few people. 164 people still watching with 121 likes. We're an hour and 40 minutes into this thing. You guys want to keep going? I mean, we got super chats here coming through, so let's just keep going with the super chats. I guess if you guys are going to keep loading me up with that stuff, we'll just keep going, right? Michael Bruce, $9.99. Thank you so much for the support and everything you're doing for the Uneducated Economist to keep the entertainment going with his comment. Says, thanks for what you do here. Well, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it, man. And everybody who supports the Uneducated Economist, remember, there's other ways that you can support the Uneducated Economist. I have all the Cash App and PayPal and Venmo and stuff like that, and you can hit all those links. You can also become a Patreon member. I'm not going to promise that I'm going to post there every single day, but I'm going to try and post there a few times a week if I can. I've been getting into more writing and then using Chat GTP to kind of clean up the writing and making it funner to read, more fun to read. Anyhow, I've been really enjoying it. This stuff that you are not going to get anywhere else. It is definitely my breakdown of credible threat theory and how it is that I am seeing the economy right now and using the credible threat theory to come up with some much better articles that I think are not only incredibly informative, but also entertaining to read as well. So you can always find, ways to support the Uneducated Economist by heading over to Patreon and becoming a member of Patreon over there. And I do have a free section of it. I will post stuff that's for non-paying members, but, there's also paid member, exclusive stuff as well over there. So anyway, thank you everybody for supporting the Uneducated Economist. Thank you. All right. Interest rate cuts coming. I mean, yeah, even if they do, think about it, Kurt, even if they do cut interest rates, I mean, I think to myself, okay, so it's going to be 6 months to a year before we really feel the effects of that interest rate adjustment anyway, right? And so if the Federal Reserve was to wait until the end of the year, let's say that they wait till the end of the year to cut interest rates, it would take 6 months to a year before we would really feel the effects of it anyway. So we're talking so far down the road, like a year and a half, if we were to have any kind of significant rate cut. Because you think about it, a quarter point, I mean, how impactful will that really be? We saw a half a rate point cut followed by another rate cut, and then we still got mortgage rates that are as high as they've ever been, right? Or at least not coming down significantly on those rate cuts. They actually went up. So to me, the Fed rate cut is really insignificant. It's irrelevant. It doesn't really mean anything. The communication about it means everything. The communication is by far the most important part of this, because if you go and you look right now, you're going to find all the Fed officials are stepping out and talking, and they're all disagreeing, and they all disagree with Jerome Powell, and Donald Trump is disagreeing with Jerome Powell, and nobody knows what the hell is going on. And a couple of Fed officials are coming out saying, no, it's appropriate. Everything is okay. We can still wait and see and how the data goes, and wonder if tariffs are actually going to create an inflationary scenario. And then I think to myself, Phillips Jefferson talked about this. He talked about this exact thing. Right? He talked about how it is that they would create the fear, uncertainty, and doubt within the economy. within the people's perception. It goes down like this. Right? And it's funny because here, let me back it up because I don't typically read this entire thing, but I think it's good right here. If you take this section of the speech and you think about how it is that they use specific sentences to alter asset prices and how it either creates an increase or decrease in the financial like an easing or tightening of financial conditions. You think about it, their communications do this. They know it does this. So if you know that when they speak their words, and it takes time, like you think about it, they speak words over a certain amount of time. It takes time for this to affect the economy. So this isn't something like they deploy this week and then change it in a couple of days. This is something that they put out there to over time, right? Again, like think about the dot plot map at the end of 2023, where the Federal Reserve said that through the statement on economic projections that they were going to have 7 rate cuts coming, but ultimately, which drove down made the financial markets easier, like eased the financial conditions. Mortgage rates started coming down, and then the moment that they started cutting rates, everything unwound and went the other direction, right? Easing and tightening of financial conditions based on their words, based on their communications. Take that into consideration. Now listen to this. Surely, sometimes central bank communications can have an unintended consequence. Let me give you 2 examples. First, there is always the risk that policymakers' statement about their economic outlook or their expected future path of the policy rate are interpreted by the public with a false sense of certainty. For example, a data-dependent forward guidance announcement can be mistaken for a commitment to a fixed path of interest rates. When the Federal Reserve, we are data dependent, and people hear that and say, oh, there's a rate cut coming in June, or the rate cut coming in July, right? And the Fed is saying, no, we're data dependent. And then everybody says, no, they already got all the data they need. This is happening, right? They're misunderstanding the communications. When the interpretation is proven wrong down the road, it can create more volatility and uncertainty than if there had been no announcement. So they know, like, when people were definitely expecting, because of the statement on economic projections, otherwise known as the dot plot, when people heard that there was going to be 7 rate cuts coming in 2024, they were very, like, proven wrong with their understanding, and it created the uncertainty. Right? Everybody was convinced. I don't know how many people told me that they're cutting to 0. And I was just like, I wonder if they're going to even cut at all. Right. And I said they might do some symbolic cuts. And that's essentially what it ended up being, right? I mean, they still have elevated Fed funds rate, and those were essentially symbolic cuts, and that's what I was calling them. I mean, if they continued to cut, then that would have been different, but they didn't. They made the 2 rate cuts, and then they said, well, now we're going to wait and see. All right, so people misinterpreted that information. So, for example, a data-dependent forward guidance announcement can be mistaken for a commitment to a fixed path of interest rates. When that interpretation is proven wrong down the road, like what happened, right, it can create more volatility and uncertainty than if there had been no announcement. So if the Fed had just been quiet about it and just let it go, they wouldn't have created all this fear and uncertainty that came from them putting out this statement on economic projections, which is not a fixed rate policy path, but just an idea of where it is that they would go with interest rates if these things work to continue, which everybody knows that things change. So there's no way that that was going to be an actual, like, forward guidance announcement of how much they were going to be cutting rates. It was misinterpreted. And it was proven wrong to them. All right. And again, most people who hear it think about it being fixed. Like, I don't know how many people said, no, they've already committed themselves to an interest rate, all these interest rate cuts coming in 2024. And I said, no, that was the statement on economic projections, which is not a promise to cut rates. And I don't know how many people actually took that into consideration. Very few, right? And that's why they misinterpreted the information and they were proven wrong and they got upset about that, right? A lot of people got upset. All right. That is, and said that the Fed was bumping around like Mr. Magoo because they already made all these stupid like commitments to their ideas that the Federal Reserve was going to be cutting rates to zero. And then they had to say, oh, the Fed is making a mistake. They're bumping around like Mr. Magoo. They don't know what they're doing. It's just so like, it's so messed up. I mean, I guess you can understand the Fed that way, and if that works out for you, go for it. But I'd much rather understand it from the fact that they know that they are using their words to create specific sentences to alter asset prices and ease and tighten financial conditions, and I want to figure out how it is that they are doing that. That's what I want to figure out, Not that, oh, well, I guess I don't know what they're doing, and I'll just say that they're bumping around like Mr. Magoo. That works for some people, I guess. I don't know. All right. Back to work. When the interpretation is proven wrong down the road, it can create more volatility and uncertainty than if there had been no announcement. That is why policymakers always make sure to stress that they are data dependent of future policy decisions. Always. Always. They never commit themselves to any direction, they do commit themselves to a direction. They don't commit themselves to any fixed. It's always data dependent. Second, it is possible that the public misinterprets the views of individual policymakers as a committee view. That's including Jerome Powell. Right? They misinterpret his view as a committee view. And actually, his view is speaking on the behalf of the FOMC. So his view is the committee view. Right? I mean, people say, like, if you fire Jerome Powell, and I'm like, his view doesn't change anything about the FOMC. The FOMC is a bunch of voting members who all have their own beliefs and ideas on what it is that monetary policy needs to be conducted like, and they all have their own vote. And Jerome Powell is not in charge of anybody's vote except for his own. And the faster you understand that, the easier it is for you to understand how the monetary policy is really going to be conducted to affect your life. Because if you're stuck on the idea that you can fire Jerome Powell, then you're never going to be able to see any of this other stuff. You just won't. You just simply will not. It's just easier to just say, I don't want to read all that stuff, and I don't want to learn any of that stuff, and I just want to blame Jerome Powell instead and call that easier, and then maybe just call the uneducated economist an idiot. Right? Because that's probably so much easier than trying to figure this stuff out for yourself. I mean, I admit it probably would be easier. All right. The potential for misinterpretation is especially acute when many policymakers speak at the same time and disagree with each other. Have you read any of the statements coming from the FOMC right now? Every single one of them is doing interviews, and every single one of them is disagreeing with each other. And they all disagree with Jerome Powell, and they all disagree with Trump, and they all disagree with each other. The potential for misinterpretation is especially acute when many policymakers speak at the same time and disagree with each other. The diversity of viewpoints among policymakers lends itself to stimulating debates and, ultimately, better policy. Better policy. But in such a situation, more communication could increase rather than reduce uncertainty about our policy. They use it. They use that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and they create the uncertainty by having many of them come out at the same time and disagree with each other, and they know that they can create an open-ended understanding of what it is that's going to be happening into the future so that their propagandized information that they deliver through the mainstream media will have more of an impact on you. If you were sure in your understanding of what it was that was taking place, they could say whatever they want and it wouldn't change your mind. That's why they do it this way. If they can make you very unsure, very fear, very doubtful, blaming, hateful, resentful, that's the energy you need to be in to be controlled. The moment that you are confident, sure, aware, right? You listening and like, I heard you, but you're kind of talking out your ass when you say that you want to fire Jerome Powell and replace yourself with him and do all these things that are just really just naive to the understanding of how it is that the Federal Reserve even operates. And really, ultimately, you're doing is guiding people down another naive thought, which is directing them away from a better understanding of how it is that they can position themselves so that they can have a better way of life, which is that of ultimately becoming a capitalist and property owner themselves. And since the rich elite don't like competition, they certainly don't want you doing it either. But they don't have any other choice. They can't stop you from doing it. That's the awesome thing about it. People say, oh, they're preventing you from doing all these wonderful things that you could be doing with your life. And I'm thinking, no, they are not. No, they're not. You're stopping yourself from doing it because you believe that you're being stopped. Don't believe it. $5 from Early Bird. You said earlier that it all ends with the miserable time for everyone. Yeah, it kind of does when the new money turns off. What does the misery look like? Well, I mean, you got to think about it. It's just like everybody is kind of. We have an economy that essentially imports foreign production and then sells it to each other. That would come to an end. So nobody would have like the work. Food production would probably be inadequate. It would be very difficult time to even try to describe, as it would be a complete collapse of everything that you would have ever anticipated being as far as like a functioning society would go. Now, I don't believe that that can happen in an overnight scenario. Like, I mean, it can. I don't believe that's what is going to happen. What I honestly believe is going to happen is they are going to lock the people in to a central bank digital currency type of financial banking government issuance system that is then going to force the people into a way of existence that then has like the negative interest rates, being able to have the central banks conducting themselves in this fashion that they have somewhat traditionally been in. Like they want to continue to reign the power, and the only way to do that is go on digital assets and negative interest rates. And so that's the path that I really believe that we're going to be heading down. I don't think that there's going to be a collapse of the dollar system. I don't think that we are going to be suffering in pain and misery. I think that there's going to be ever increasing amounts of inequality. I think that it's going to be very difficult for a lot of people out there who choose not to take advantage of the situation that they are in which that you have to find multiple streams of revenue and income. And the idea that we shouldn't have to do that is going to be left to the people who are going to be behind. All right. I mean, I don't think we should have to do it either. I don't want to do it. Like, I'm not trying to say that I'm trying to develop a way of system that says, hey, man, this is the way it's going to work for everybody. I'm telling you, this is how I'm doing it inside of this system because I don't have any other choice. Right? So since I don't have any other choice, I'm not going to say, oh, well, boo-hoo, I don't want to do it this way. Well, this is the way I'm doing it. And this is the way I'm going to get it done. And I mean, I think other people can do it too. If they were to just kind of take a look at their life and say, where can I cut back on my expenses? Where it is that I can bring in more revenue? And how do I deploy that into investments that is going to have some sort of return to me? Yeah. And that's really where I think it's going to go. There's going to be some kind of weird change to the way that global trade is done, because I really think the rise of the BRICS nations is more of a benefit to the Federal Reserve trying to provide their liabilities to the demand of the world's needs for that liability. I think that is a very difficult road for the Federal Reserve to be on. And I think that the idea of the BRICS nations is somewhat of a relief to that problem that the Fed is facing. How do they provide the world with enough of their liabilities when the demand for their liabilities begins to explode? How do you not send the government on an unsustainable debt path? Like they're already on an unsustainable debt path. How do you not like expedite the problem when the demand for the Fed's liabilities begins to explode because of the sheer amount of debt issuance that was done in dollars? When people are like, when you don't understand what it is that I'm saying right now, then it's like these problems that are faced on a global scale are much, much bigger than you could ever possibly have imagined. All right. To know that there is dollar denominated debt that is so much bigger than the available dollars to pay it off lends me to believe that it is a very, very, very unlikely scenario that the dollar is going to be anywhere, anything other than the king dollar of all currencies out there for a significant amount of time going into the future. Like, I have very little doubt in my mind. So people are like, oh, dollar's about ready to go out. And I'm like, no, that mentality benefits the Federal Reserve. I know that sounds weird, but it's the truth. If you believe that the dollar is going to fail, if you think that there's inflation, hyperinflation, and dollar devaluation coming to the future, that is exactly what it is that the Federal Reserve needs you to believe and think about. They need you to have elevated inflation expectations. They want you to have it. You don't believe me? Here, hold on. I'll prove it to you. See, this isn't me. This isn't me saying this stuff. This is why I think it's so cool, because I can back up all this stuff that I say with speeches and stuff coming directly from the Federal Reserve members themselves. This is monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world. Love this speech. This speech, he gave it all away. John Williams spilled the beans with that speech. Monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world. I have talked about this speech 1,000 times. Right? People are already bailing out. They're like, oh man, not that one again, right? It says this: today we face an altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. How many times do you hear me talking about the low neutral interest rate being the problem? It wasn't me saying it. It was the Federal Reserve saying it. I'm just trying to explain it to you what was going on. I mean, this is what I learned from the Fed. The Fed was saying this was the problem, not me. Today, we face an altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. That is, the short-term real interest rate consistent with an economy operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. Ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. That right there should tell everybody, if you are believing in a hyperinflationary scenario, you are solving the Fed's problem. They said it. The problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. The Federal Reserve was saying we need inflation that is persistently too high. That would be a great problem for them to have. That was the problem they need to solve. If they could solve that problem, it wouldn't be a problem anymore to have persistently high inflation. So how many people keep wanting to come and say, dude, you're such a shill for the Fed? And I'm thinking, why? Because I'm trying to tell people don't believe in the hyperinflationary scenario because you're giving power to the Federal Reserve. And then they come to me and say, dude, the dollar is so going to fail. You're such a horrible person for not, trying to badmouth the Federal Reserve. And I'm thinking, I am badmouthing the Federal Reserve. I'm exposing the strategy that would end the Federal Reserve, and nobody wants to hear it. And then they want to turn around and look at the Federal Reserve in a way that gives them all this power. It's like, how could this possibly be? How could it be that I'm the only one? I don't get it, right? It's because they have absolutely convinced everybody. Says here, what does a low neutral interest rate mean for monetary policy when the anchoring of inflation expectations? When recession hits, central banks may not be able to reduce interest rates well below their neutral level to stimulate the economy as warranted because of the effective lower bound on nominal interest rates. They couldn't get far enough below zero, right? Zero. or as far left below neutral without hitting the lower bound of zero. The neutral interest rate is a rate in which the Federal Reserve is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy, and it was very close to zero. John Williams was saying it, not me. This shortfall of monetary accommodation would result in less desirable economic outcomes during the recession and recovery. In particular, inflation would typically undershoot its loads. The persistence of below... Oh, are you guys back? All right. The persistence of below target inflation rate in many advanced economies over the past decade is a testament to this dynamic. Everybody was experiencing this across the globe. All these central banks around the world was experiencing low neutral interest rate, very close to the lower bound of zero, and they were having a very difficult time stimulating their economies. Man. Here, hold on. This downward shift in inflation expectation has a second round effect on real interest rates. This is real important. I think this right now is occurring within the economy and people are not recognizing it. I think this is occurring in the economy right now and people are not recognizing it. The downward shift in inflation expectations has a second round effect on real interest rates, the economy, and inflation. When policy is constrained by the effective lower bound, the downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates. Think about that. The downward shift in inflation expectations raises the real interest rates, further diminishing the degree of monetary stimulus, making the downturn worse and reducing inflation even more. This is important. This right here, this little brief moment right here in this speech, I think is very telling of our situation we are facing right now. Because this is where most people are missing it. Why the economy is less restricted, why it's so resilient. All right, I'm going to break this down here in just again. Just give me a second. Even in times when policy is not constrained, the expectations of below target inflation in the future affects current decisions, putting additional downward pressure on inflation. In other words, monetary policy is always swimming upstream, fighting a current of too low inflation expectation that interferes with achieving the target inflation rate. Okay, now I know this is going to be very difficult for a lot of people to try and internalize, but how it is that this low inflation expectation is actually diminishing the ability for the Federal Reserve to stimulate the economy is a really, really hard thing for a lot of people to try and wrap their head around. But I'm going to do it for you right here, okay? This downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates. Now, we have to think about this in a simple form. If you are an investor who is intending on getting a return of 2% on your investment, but you have an inflation expectation of 1%, the real interest rate of return is 1%, what you get after inflation. If you lower the inflation expectations, you will raise the real interest rates to 2%. Lower the inflation expectation, raise the real interest rates. Right? And this works on, like, if you have high inflation, it eats away at your debts. If you have low inflation, it doesn't eat away at your debts as easy. Right? So if you have low inflation expectation, you raise the real interest rates. But if you raise the inflation expectation, you will lower the real interest rates. And this is so critical to understand. Why it is that most people misunderstand this is because they have never had this taught to them and it's never been communicated to them. Right? The whole idea of lowering the inflation expectation and raising the real interest rates is taught to them, but it's not taught to them in the monetary policy fashion. This is the difference, right? Because this acts as a monetary policy tool. Right? So, in this sense, let's read this backwards. The downward shift in inflation expectation has a second round effect on real interest rates, the economy, and inflation. When policy is constrained, let's just get rid of that part. When the downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates. Let's read it the other way. The upward shift in inflation expectation lowers the real interest rates. The upward shift in inflation expectation lowers the real interest rates, increasing the degree of monetary stimulus. Increasing the degree of monetary stimulus, making the economy, I guess, well, it says here making the downturn worse, so it wouldn't be down, making the economy less resilient, right? And increasing inflation even more, which would seem the asset prices and all that other stuff. So few people see this way. 122 people watching right now. We had a bunch of people bail out. That's okay. The 122 people who are watching right now, we get it, right? Or the 121. Wow, look at all these comments. I have read the Bible 4 times now. Every time I find out just a little more. Yeah, and you always will, man. It's counterintuitive what you are describing. I know it is, Mr. Chips, but try to understand what I am describing is something that the Federal Reserve has communicated. I am just merely sharing the information with you. I am not trying to say I have discovered something on my own that I have invented. Unless you're talking about the credible threat theory, which I believe is me compiling the information that I have found from the Federal Reserve itself and sharing that information with you, is literally what I have done here. This is not me. This is the results of the Uneducated Economist YouTube channel diving into monetary policy, breaking down speeches from a working class point of view. This is the results of the information. Okay? It's psychological warfare. You're right, TM. Right? What do you mean, Bob Utter? Okay. Bob, they are going to lower rates and drive prices up. Bob, it doesn't matter if they lower rates. We already know this, that they can use specific sentences to alter the asset prices, to create an easing or tightening of financial conditions. They don't need to move the rates. What have I been saying for the last hour? Right? Describing it from the very beginning with the gold machine from Ben Bernanke. If you want to focus in on the Fed funds rate as your primary indication or primary expectation of how the economy is going to function going into the future, you are going to miss it. Period. You will miss it. Everybody's going to miss it. It's because they're not doing it that way. They do it through their communications. How many Fed officials have just came out and babbling on in so many different directions to try and create the fear, uncertainty, and doubt within the people's ideas of what it is that's going to happen with monetary policy? How many? Right? And then here, Philip Jefferson is describing exactly how they use that, how they do that exact thing for their monetary policy. Are we done? We're 2 hours and 12 minutes into this with 152 people watching. We've had a lot of people come and go on this live stream. 139 likes. If you're still liking this live stream, keep hitting that thumbs up button. By hitting that thumbs up button, the YouTube algorithm will continue to spread this video around. However, if you are frustrated with the idea of what it is that I am saying out here and you no longer want me to continue on, you know that hitting that thumbs down button is just as good for the algorithm. Actually, it's not. It sends people away, but that's okay. If you don't like it, you don't like it. The ninja loans aren't present in debt today. The worst thing is China already built Skynet. They even call it that. Don't worry, they said it's good Skynet. Smokescreen and wording, everything is simulation. The speeches are meant to condition people into believing and behaving a certain way. No, they're not. The speeches are not. The speeches are not that way. You know why? Because nobody reads the speeches, right? Only the uneducated economist reads the speeches because I'm the only one who talks about the things that are in the speeches. Everybody else is listening to their talking points that they put out there on the mainstream media, which is propagandized information. It is not the speeches that they are listening to. The only people who are listening to the speeches is the uneducated economist. Right? I mean, I'm the only one breaking them down. I don't know anybody else who's doing it. And when they do talk about the speeches, they talk and then they talk about the unimportant parts and dismiss all the important parts of it. So that's more propaganda. Like, no, they don't. Nobody reads the speeches. And they're not being used in the same fashion as the propagandized information coming over the mainstream media. I respect what you do. Thank you, Mr. Chips. Correct. What is trying to tell Simon? Day traders have been watching for sentiment for years. No, they're not. No, day traders are not watching anything that I'm watching. Right? They're not doing anything like I'm talking about. They're not experiencing it the same way. Right? They're not giving it the same meaning. There's nobody, I guarantee you, there is nobody out there who can debate monetary policy like I can. Right? How many people do you think will be able to call out Federal Reserve speeches and be able to take it back 20 years and describe the strategy accurately up until today and use their own words to back up every single thing that I say? And like, I don't know how many people would be able to do it. Nobody. Nobody's got it dialed in like this. Right? And I don't mean to be some bragging it up like I'm smarter than everybody else. Nobody sees it from the working class point of view like I did. Nobody wanted to look at it like I did. Everybody was trying to figure out how it is that they can invest their money with the information. I was just simply trying to know what the hell the strategy was. And that was it. And when I'm sitting there listening to Ben Bernanke talk about how it is that they were going to use a gold machine to create an inflationary scenario, and listening to John Williams talk about pushing inflation extra hot, extra long for an extended period of time, 2 years before it took place, and then reading about how Powell was saying, yeah, they're going to continue to let inflation run extra hot, extra long for an extended period of time, and they didn't even have inflation taking place yet, knowing that it was going to be a painful experience. And they say, yeah, we're going to switch to this average inflation. And by the way, we're not going to tell you what it is either. We're not going to tell you. Hey, hold on one second. See, people just don't want to believe me. Hold on. Let me bring it up. That way you guys get it. All right. August 27th, 2020. All right. This is before the inflationary scenario happened. The persistent undershoot of inflation from our 2% long-run objective is a cause for concern. Many find it counterintuitive that the Fed would want to push up inflation after find it counterintuitive that the Fed would want to push up inflation. I was finding it counterintuitive that you could even do it. I mean, you just went through quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, balance sheet expansion of $4.5 trillion or $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion, failed to produce an inflationary scenario, and basically saying now we find it counterintuitive that you would want to push it up. I found it counterintuitive that you could even do it. After all, low and stable inflation is essential for a well-functioning economy, and we are certainly mindful that higher prices for essential items such as food, gasoline, and shelter add to the burdens faced by many families, especially those struggling with lost jobs and incomes. However, right, we know it's painful, especially you at the lower end, suffering with lost jobs and incomes, higher price of food, gasoline, and shelter. However, without this painful experience on the lower class people who can't really deal with the pain, have no way of being able to ease the pain on themselves as their paychecks get worse and worse going into the future. However, with inflation that is persistently too low, can pose serious risks to the economy. Pose serious risk to everybody else other than the poor people. So the poor people should feel the pain in order to deal with this persistent problem. However, inflation that is persistently too low can pose a serious risk to the economy. Inflation that runs below its desired level can lead to unwelcome fall in long-term inflation expectations, which in turn can pull actual inflation even lower, resulting in an adverse cycle of ever lower inflation and inflation expectations. Does it sound like they were having a problem with too low of inflation and that they were going to about ready to cause some pain and suffering upon the people, even though inflation hadn't happened yet? I mean, COVID was just kicking in, but the supply chain breakdown hadn't taken place. Money printer, stimulus packages, all that other stuff, still yet to come. To prevent this outcome and adverse dynamics that could ensue, a new statement indicates that we seek to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time. They don't look for a 2% target. He just said it. They changed. The new statement indicates we will seek to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time. Therefore, following periods when inflation has been running below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. Just like the consensus statement. All right? The consensus statement, the one that we were talking about earlier, long run, hold on, what was it, the long-term, strategies? The one that we have to keep an eye out for to see what they're going to change about it here coming this summer. Okay, goes in seeking to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, we are not tying ourselves to a particular mathematical formula that defines the average. Wow, super convenient for the Federal Reserve, isn't that? 2% average inflation rate with no mathematical formula to define the average. Thus, our approach could be viewed as a flexible form of average inflation targeting. Our decision about appropriate monetary policy will continue to reflect a broad array of considerations and will not be dictated by any formula. Of course, if excessive inflationary pressures were to build, or inflation expectations were to ratchet above levels consistent with our goals, we would not hesitate to act. So tell me, where are we? Right, exactly what the Federal Reserve wanted. They wanted elevated inflation expectation to raise the neutral interest rate so that they could regain their ammunition, which is the federal funds rate being able to fall far enough below neutral before hitting the lower bound of zero. They developed the tools that they needed in order to conduct monetary policy without the need for adjustment of the Fed funds rate, and now that's what they are deploying into the economy is forward guidance, credible threats, signaling, jawboning, whatever you want to call it. But it is all about propagandized information through the mainstream media in order to deal with your fear, uncertainty, and doubt to get you to move in the direction that they feel is most appropriate for monetary policy. That's it, right? In a nutshell. Nobody else has it like that, right? Because nobody sees monetary policy correctly. They look at interest rate adjustments because that's the most important thing to them, because that's how they built their life. It's how everything that they've understood the Fed behind. It's everything to their being. If they're a mortgage lender, if they're into investments, everything is all built on this idea that there was interest rate adjustments from the Federal Reserve that was being conducted for monetary policy, and that is no longer the effective tool. Right. Coming back to Jefferson's speech, it says this. In 1981, Karl Brunner, the Swiss monetary economist, called central banking an esoteric art and lamented central banks' inherent impossibility to articulate its insight in an explicit and intelligible words and sentences. In 1981, Karl Brunner basically said that the Federal Reserve could not be able to communicate anything to the people at all. So everything that we see out here on the mainstream media when it comes to the Federal Reserve officials coming out making the statements, Karl Brunner was saying that was impossible. He was saying that it wasn't possible. Inherent impossibility to articulate its insights in explicit and intelligible words and sentences. At the time, central bank wisdoms dictated that the monetary policy makers should say as little as possible. Some research of the vintage tried to rationalize this secrecy through the notion that monetary policy would be particularly effective if it surprised the markets. They used to keep quiet. They never said anything to anybody about anything. One day you would wake up and the Fed funds rate had moved. They thought that that was the best way to conduct monetary policy, was to surprise markets. Expectations became a focal point in academic and policy circles with the emergence of the new Keynesian models in the 1990s as a framework for monetary policy. Expectations became part of the framework for monetary policy. Before, it was surprising the markets, giving them no expectations. Now it became part of the framework for monetary policy. In these models, aligning the expectations of decision makers in the private sector with those of policymakers produced superior economic outcomes. Let me read it again. Aligning the expectation of the decision makers, right? The decision makers with the private sectors, with those of the policy makers. We're the decision makers in the private sector. That is us. When you align the decision makers in the private sector with those of the policy makers, it produced a superior outcome. Mike Woodford, one of the developers of the new Keynesian model, put it this way: not only do expectations about policy matter, but very little else matters. Right? These are the people who developed this model of how it is that monetary policy was going to be conducted. They knew expectations meant everything. Right? Very little else mattered outside of the expectations. Anyway, it goes on. It goes on. And once you are aware of it, once you see it, once you recognize how it works, how they do this, how this is like going on for years, decades, 20 years. I've been going through these speeches, breaking these things down, bringing the most relevant ones to you, the most up-to-date ones to you, but you have to go back and realize that the strategy is years old. It doesn't matter. It spans administrations. It spans chairmans, right? And once you see why and how it's occurring the way it is because of economic forces that are not described or talked about. How many people talk about the neutral interest rate? If you're talking about the Fed funds rate, excuse me, people who talk about the Fed funds rate, talk about cutting the Fed funds rate, the very, very, very next thing that you should be talking about is the neutral interest rate. And since this is not a hypothetical rate, it's a real rate that nobody can observe in real time. You can look at it over time. You can look at it in the past and say that's where the neutral interest rate was. But as far as a current understanding of where exactly the neutral interest rate is, there can only be some assumptions and estimates. And the Federal Reserve R-star is the closest one that anybody is going to have out there, and very few people know to look for where the neutral interest rate may be or whether or not it's moving up or down based on an inflation expectation. Almost nobody thinks that way. I haven't heard anybody ever. I look for information that way because I want to, share it with you guys. I want to say, hey man, look at these people talking about the neutral interest rate and what their ideas about it is. I can find them. It's all crickets. And the people who do talk about it, it's just like it's very, again, it's a very esoteric idea, and they don't really give it any kind of real consideration. Has anyone seen True Detective Season 1? All right, stop running your life into the ground, get yourself a business, and buy some rental properties. Life can be great for me, but if nobody else exists, it can become kind of kind of issue. Yeah, I believe that. I'm working 4 hours tomorrow. Gonna be good. I'm at work too. Has anyone seen? Oh, we already read that one. All right. Alrighty, guys. Should we call it quits? We're 2.5 hours into this thing. I mean, I think a 2.5 hour long video is about enough. I mean, I can share this stuff all night, though. I mean, I really could. And what I love about the theories that I have developed here and the information that I am sharing with you guys is that I stick to my guns, right? I don't deviate and I don't change from what it is that I am thinking and feeling and believing out there when it comes to this monetary policy, because the information that I have gathered is coming directly from the Federal Reserve itself. If the Federal Reserve changes in their speeches, within their communications, how it is that they are, conducting themselves, I see him talking about it. Like, how many people out there really thought about stable coins being the central bank digital currency? I mean, I thought about it. I was like, it's going to be very hard for the Federal Reserve to issue a central bank digital currency. Their charter doesn't allow them to do this. Other nations can do it, but not the Federal Reserve. And people just want to dismiss it. It's like, oh, they'll just change the law. And I'm like, yeah, I know you say that, but it isn't a matter of just changing the law. The charter is created for a particular reason. And injecting money, the Federal Reserve injecting money directly into the system, is something that they tried to develop a way to prevent from happening. And knowing that the Federal Reserve is wanting to have a situation that they can use their monetary policy as they have always done it, and deploy that monetary policy directly into a stable coin, they can let Congress and the government deal with the regulation of stable coin, and they can sit back and conduct themselves the way that they have always done it. And now, if they have an ability to have cash removed from the system, it gives them a new tool of negative interest rates. Yeah. This is what's really happening within the economy, and this is something that I believed from 7 years ago studying the IMF, right? So for me, seeing the stablecoin issuance and come all about and all that, like, I almost predicted that before it happened. I didn't know it was going to be in stable coins, but I knew there was going to be a digital currency of some sort, and I knew the Federal Reserve was going to have a hell of a time trying to create one themselves, like their own Fed coin, right? Because of the charter, and that they can't just issue money directly into the system like that. But once the idea of a stable coin was coming out, and I'm thinking, man, that's it right there. Started reading speeches from the Federal Reserve talking about the stable coins and how they can regulate, or a government can regulate stable coins, and they can continue to conduct themselves the way they normally did. I thought, man, that's the easiest path to digital currencies right there. All right. Paying for Janet Yellen's husband. He sleeps with her. I thought we all knew this was the mark of the beast. AI is the mark of the beast. I am still stewing that answer. What was it you gave me the other day? Very long answer. I forget. What do we talk about? I can't remember. I forgot. I remember I did go off for a while on that, and I can't remember what we were talking about. We talk about so much stuff, guys. 10 years from now, this channel will be wiped, and Simon will be the Speaker of the Fed. I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily make a good politician or Fed official or anything like that, because I'm not somebody who's gonna like, first of all, I didn't grow up in the right family, and I didn't go to the right schools, and I don't have the right social network to be a member of that sort of community. But if I was, right, if I did and I happen to be, I'm not somebody who's going to really fall into line very well, and I would probably end up running my mouth so much that I would end up getting booted from there somehow. They would figure out a way to get me out. because I wouldn't do well. I'd be like, no, man, I'm going to tell everybody. I'm going to blast this stuff all over MTV, right? I mean, it's just like I'm not somebody who's going to hold back on things that I find that I like. I wouldn't be a good Fed official, right? They got to keep secrets and, conduct themselves in a different manner than what I would do. Like here on YouTube, I get to say whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want. It's just like, and to me, that's a beautiful thing, right? I don't have to be subject to somebody else's rules or nothing like that. Well, kind of. I mean, YouTube partnership, I got some rules I have to follow. All right, we have to attend Bohemian Grove first. Ooh, yeah, that sounds scary. By the way, I love stew. I love stew too. I like beef stew. You gotta be a snake to work in the politics. Yeah, I think like initially people who get into politics really have like best intentions. Like I really do think that they were like really wanting to do a good job and have like a belief of really impacting the people and society in a good way. But then after years go by, they just really want to hold on to their job, you know. And so I think the idea of like really being a good politician for the people kind of just slowly fades away the longer they're in the position, and then pretty soon it's just a matter of trying to hold on to that position. All right. Professor Simon, hey, it's great to see you up in here, Long John. What is this? How are you doing? I'm doing awesome, man. Santa Trump 5K stimmy. Man, wouldn't that be nice? If I got a stimulus check right now, that would be so cool. I would take that stimulus check and finish off the last of my credit card debt that I have or that I should have paid off way earlier, but I've been so focused on trying to accumulate a certain goal in my assets that I've pretty much been not paying as much as I could be on my credit card to get it down. I had to put I didn't have to. I just didn't want to give up the cash. And I put my son's braces on the credit card thinking that I would be able to pay it off in a couple of months. And just like anything else out there, life starts getting to you. And it was a couple of months later that I had to put a set of tires out there on there. And again, I was like, okay, I could pay the cash, but I want to keep the cash. So I bought and then, something else happened and I took a trip and all the other stuff. And you know how it goes. It is like, man, what a pain in the ass. So I got to my goal as far as the assets that I wanted to achieve. I just had this particular number in mind. And now that I'm there, I am going to get this credit card absolutely knocked out as quickly as possible. Like, I'm not doing any more investments except for a couple of dollar cost averaging things. Like, I started that Robinhood account to build up in a particular couple of investments. I'm going to continue that, but everything else that I do is going to go straight into that credit card to get it knocked out because I want to be out of debt again 100% except for the house. And if I could be in that position, that would be awesome. All the medical debt and different things that get picked up, accumulated, and all that other stuff, done, right? I could be done with it now. Like, I could, but I want the cash. I cut up all my credit cards except for a personal secured credit card years ago. I don't. In fact, I opened up more credit cards so I have a more available credit. And I have a credit score of 830, so I use my credit pretty regularly. Not that I have any intentions, but if I did, it would be nice to have that available credit and the credit rating to go with it. All right, stablecoin issuers will and are buying our debt just like the banks. That should tell you need to know. Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. Now, they are buying the short-term government debt, and they're buying, like cash and cash equivalent stuff, much like maybe a money market would be doing. But the long-term debt, they're not necessarily buying into that stuff, and banks do. I am doing well on my budget, only $100 over. I hear that, Yui. Okay, guys, this was a lot of fun, but I think we got to call it quits. 150 people watching. That's quite incredible. I really appreciate everybody staying out so late to join in on today's live stream. We have 161 likes. Hitting that like button is one of the easiest ways that you can support the Uneducated Economist. By hitting that like button, you help the YouTube algorithm spread this video around for more people to join in on the conversation. And thank you so much for all those super chats. You guys are always so generous with them super chats, and it is really a very easy way to support the Uneducated Economist is by sending a super chat right through the comment section. YouTube does take a portion of that super chat, but really, without the platform, I'm pretty grateful to have that, and if they do take some of it, they do. However, there are places that you can go to here on the Uneducated Economist, down in the comment section where you can find places that you can donate through the PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, stuff like that. And of course, always the affiliate link, which I really appreciate people who have made purchases through Amazon, but hitting that affiliate link first. By hitting that affiliate link, you will be able to put stuff into your cart, and I will get a commission off of everything you put in the cart for the next 24 hours and purchase within the next 30 days. So be sure and check out the Amazon affiliate link that I leave down in the description. Also the podcast. I mean, a lot of people would rather listen to these long 2.5 hour long videos in a podcast form. My wife does upload those, so sometimes he gets backed up a little ways, but I assure you they will all eventually make it up to the podcast, so give her just a little bit of time to get those up there. But it is a great place that you can go to listen to these videos as opposed to watching them here on YouTube. And of course, becoming a member of the channel, right? $1 a month here on YouTube, the members only channel or portion of this channel where it is part of the YouTube. But then also I have a membership to Patreon as well. So again, if all these different ways that you can support the Uneducated Economist, I appreciate it. I put out a lot of hard work to try and bring you, understanding of monetary policy from a working class point of view, unlike anybody else is doing. And I hope that I'm somewhat entertaining while doing it. All right, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.